Hey, what's going on? Welcome to Trying Not to Die. I am your host, Jack Osbourne.
I'm Ryan Drexler.
All right, so I'm very excited about this episode. It is something that it's a subject that has been a passion of mine for such a long time: UFO, paranormal world. And we are joined today by Dan Farah.
Thanks for having me.
Dan, thank you
Appreciate it.
so much for joining us. I'm pumped for this. My background for the last 15 years has been making paranormal content. That's been my bread and butter. And, I have mainly done ghost cryptid stuff. Just cause, it's hard to do UFO stuff. It's, you got to have the right access. You got to have the right footage as you know.
It's true.
It doesn't always make for the best TV shows if you're just staring at the sky waiting for something. Hey everyone, real quick, head over to cavemancoffee.com and check out all the coffee we have. We've got everything from canned nitro. We've got these amazing hibiscus teas, and we have tons of actual coffee. So head over to cavemancoffee.com. But Dan, you're a filmmaker. Tell us a little bit about how'd you get into it? What was your background? What inspired you to want to start telling stories?
Yeah, so for the last 20 years, I've just been working in mainstream Hollywood primarily as a producer, managing also a bunch of writers, really focused on mainstream entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the thing I'm the most proud of is one of the producers of Ready Player One, mm-hmm. which we built from the ground up off of Ernie Klein's great book.
One of my favorite books of all time. I read that book like 3 times.
Super talented writer.
Yeah.
And this topic's just something that's always been interesting to me. My childhood was the 80s and early 90s. Grew up on movies like Close Encounters and E.T. and TV shows like X-Files. Yep. Like a lot of people around the world. That pop culture totally piqued my curiosity, my interest in this topic, in UFOs and these big questions like, are we alone in the universe? Does the U.S. government know more about this than the public, as all those movies depicted, right? So over the years, I've, like a lot of people, just consumed every documentary that's ever come out on this topic, and read as many books as I could on the topic. And I always wished that someone would make a super credible documentary that only interviewed people who have direct knowledge of this topic as a result of working for the U.S. government. Set the bar there. If in fact people who work for the government know more than us, I would love to learn what they can lawfully share. That's, that was my outlook. And unfortunately, no one ever made that documentary, right? Obviously, it's hard to pull off. So, after Ready Player One came out in 2018, I was thinking about future projects, and I was doing some research on this topic, and I got introduced to a few intelligence officials who actively worked on the UAP issue for the U.S. government. And in my private conversations, I started to learn how real the situation is and how seriously it's taken behind the scenes, how there really is a there. And the things I was learning in these conversations were just blowing my mind. And at one point I just, said to myself, these people and their associates are the ideal people to have in a documentary, and, have them share with the world what they lawfully can. So I basically just became determined in that moment to try to pull it off and have them start opening doors for me. There's a very long process from there, but
Sure.
That's sort of how I got into it.
Working with Spielberg, was that a bit of an inspiration? Because he's clearly been interested in the subject matter for a very, very long time. Close Encounters of the Third Kind really sets the bar for, storytelling of this subject.
Yeah.
Did you have conversations with him about it?
Yeah. So certainly no one's work has inspired me more. Like Close Encounters is hands down my favorite film, and piqued my curiosity in this topic more than anything else. It's a genius film and totally ahead of its time. So grounded and serious and real. And he clearly had inside knowledge in the 70s when he made that. It's an incredible film. So and when we were making Ready Player One, being on set, watching him direct in person, is incredibly inspiring, and it definitely got me thinking in that moment that after years of producing, I would be excited to find something to direct. And that did get my wheels spinning. And then ultimately, I decided this documentary should be that film.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, like I wanted to direct in the beginning. Like when I was in like middle school and high school, I spent all my free time making short films with my buddies that I grew up with. They would star in them, and I would direct them and produce them and edit them on a little splicing machine with Super 8 film. And I always thought that's what I wanted to do at first, but then I got into producing and did that for 20 years. So yeah, being around Steven directing, seeing it in person, it's impossible not to be inspired and to want to take a shot at.
Did he ever share any of the knowledge about what he learned of UFOs, UAPs back when making Close Encounters?
We didn't really talk about the making of Close Encounters. No. One interesting thing he did say when we were just chatting on set was that Poltergeist, which people forget he wrote and produced. He wrote that in a couple days.
Wow.
He said he got held up in a hotel room and drank a lot of coffee and knocked it out. And I just think that's unbelievably impressive.
Yeah.
You go back and watch that movie, it's also ahead of its time.
Big time. Yeah.
Amazing movie.
Oh, the movie's so good. I watched that recently. And I forgot that he wrote it when the credits came out. I was like, oh shit, I totally.
Amazing. Amazing. How'd you get in contact with the people in the government and stuff? How did you initially make those connections? And of course, talking to people in government, it's almost literally impossible. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, no, it's a lengthy process. So basically, when I was doing research early on about this topic, I got introduced to a few intelligence officials and people who had worked on this topic in the past, and started spending time with them, forming relationships with them. And when they started sharing information, that made me realize, wow, like there's a there. This is a serious situation. Like if your average person was hearing this, they'd have their mind blown. This stuff has to end up in a super serious documentary.
Yeah.
Then I started, sharing, the fact that I would be excited to try to pull that off, to try to make that film. And what I quickly realized is the reason all the people who have direct knowledge of this, that have information they can lawfully speak about, the reason they haven't talked about it in the past is no one guy wanted to go out on a limb and be the one guy saying extraordinary things and being subject to ridicule and pushback. There is a legitimate cover-up that has been keeping all this information hidden for the last 80 years. And historically, they try to ruin the reputations of anyone who speaks up, right? Anyone who sticks their head up and shares the truth kind of gets hit back down.
It's probably easy. Yeah.
They try to ruin their careers, they ruin their reputation, sometimes threaten their lives. And so all these people that I met in my early process, they explained to me that those are the reasons they've been deterred from speaking up in the past, whether it's going on a major news network or a podcast or even participating in other documentaries. That's what's held them back in the past. And so I started formulating a plan for how to pull it off. And simply put, I started just socializing that I understood why they hadn't spoken up in the past, but what if I create an environment that was comfortable and safe for them? And that my pitch was essentially, I'll make this film independently, in secrecy, independently financed, won't go to a studio or network that's going to sensationalize it or publicize the process. I would only interview people who have direct knowledge of the topic as a result of working for the U.S. government, credible, serious people, so that they're arm in arm with other like-minded, credible people. I would socialize the names, so if anyone had a problem with someone, they could let me know, and no one would know about it until it was done and we launched a trailer. And so these people would be able to step out of the shadows with what they lawfully can share in a way that, has strength in numbers, basically, and comfort in being arm in arm with all these other people.
I'm surprised you weren't nervous to the fact that's getting out to, it's the contractors or the government that you're actually poking around. And
I was definitely nervous.
I would be.
I was definitely nervous.
I would be.
there were moments early on where some people tried to discourage me from pursuing this. But I also thought that there was strength in numbers, because
Okay, good.
as I
Good.
built more relationships, it was kind of like passed from one person to the next. And
Sure.
you meet one person, you spend some time with them, you form a relationship. A month later they call and say, "Hey, I want you to talk to my friend."
Yeah.
And just one door led to another door. I felt like I was also protected by strength in numbers. There was like a brewing support internally. And so what ended up happening in that process, some point in that process, a number of senior members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, were told about this quietly and came to the conclusion that this was, in fact, the best way. My film was the best way to bring out the truth. And I think at that point, when like Rubio leaned in and when Senator Gillibrand leaned in,
Sure.
the process started to get a lot of momentum. I was introduced to senior leadership of the Senate Intelligence Committee and senior leadership of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and formed a great relationship with them. They made it clear they wanted to be helpful. They thought this film was really important and that it was the best vehicle for bringing out the truth and essentially for disclosure. And they helped facilitate introductions. They helped give me, intel on certain people I should stay clear of or certain people I should, get to know.
Yeah.
Extremely supportive behind the scenes. And then when it came to actually making it, they were also extremely supportive. Like I had unprecedented access to shoot the film in Senate hearing rooms and
Wow.
Certain parts of Senate buildings that typically people don't get to shoot in.
Yeah.
I had a lot of time with each of the officials I interviewed. It wasn't like a 15, 20-minute interview.
Yeah.
These were all,
They gave that time.
really lengthy interview times, and they were planned out. They were talked through in advance. Everyone knew what the objective of the film was, to go right up to the line that they can't cross, and to reveal the big picture to not only the American people, but, humanity at large. And a number of the most senior people in my film literally went out of their way to tell me off camera that they, after thinking through all the different possibilities for how to bring this information out, they really were confident that this film was the best way to do it. And the way I was doing it, they had all spent enough time talking to me, or their handlers, their people had spent time talking to me, to really understand that I had put the time in to understand the lay of the land, how serious it was. My objective was to make the most credible film ever made on this topic, to treat it seriously and give it the,
Well, the thing that popped out to me when watching it is like there's a level of there's integrity in it, and I think a lot of the UAP UFO world, it gets kind of, I don't know the term. It's almost like it gets jovialized, I guess. Is that the? I don't know if it becomes too much sensationalized. Yeah, and it becomes like a caricature of itself. It's like, aliens go, whatever. It gets too it gets too corny.
Yeah,
and it didn't feel that. This felt very, very serious, and I appreciated that when I was watching it, because it is a serious situation. I just want to go back a little bit. For people that don't know anything about this film, don't know what it's about, give the elevator pitch.
Yeah. So essentially, I interviewed 34 very high level military, government, and intelligence officials who collectively broke their silence to reveal that there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of non-human intelligent life. And on top of that, they reveal that elements of the U.S. government have been involved in a high-stakes, secret Cold War race with adversarial nations to reverse engineer this technology of non-human origin. And, as extraordinary as that sounds, the people I interviewed couldn't be more credible. And it ranges from, our Secretary of State Rubio to, General Jim Clapper, to senators on both sides of the aisle, admirals, very senior intelligence officials, members of the White House National Security Council. And notably, it's extremely bipartisan.
Mm-hmm.
There's leaders from both parties, from the House and Senate, that are all completely in sync, which, in this day and age is a really extraordinary thing to see.
Yeah.
The leaders of both parties don't seem to agree on anything, but in this film, they agree that this is the biggest issue of our time.
Yeah. What if a sore throat and a fever that hit you overnight didn't mean you had to cancel a family trip, miss work, or waste hours at urgent care? Instead, you could just open your medical emergency kit from the wellness company, match your symptoms to the doctor-recommended guide, and start treatment immediately. This is not a first aid kit. This is a mini urgent care right at your fingertips. Inside, you'll find 8 core prescriptions that treat over 30 conditions like COVID, strep throat, pneumonia, urinary tract infections, and so many more. No waiting rooms, no pharmacy lines, modernized medicine right when you need it. Ordering is simple. At checkout, complete a short intake form. A licensed doctor will review, fill your scripts, and preventative peace of mind arrives at your home within a week. Be prepared. Save yourself time and money. The Medical Emergency Kit puts urgent care in your hands. Order your kit now by heading to twc.health/trying and use the code TRYING to save up to $30 off, plus free shipping. Don't let illness catch you off guard. Order your kit now by heading to twc.health/trying and use the code TRYING to save up to $30 off, plus free shipping. Kits available to U.S. residents only. So, some of the takeaway from it for me, watching the film, was that there seemed to be like a genuine concern that we don't know what these things are. These entities, these craft, whatever they're being kind of categorized as, have the ability to do things which is kind of outside our knowledge of physics, and that's scary. Do you think that do you think there's a threat with these?
Yeah, I mean, everyone I interviewed was extremely concerned about what's at stake,
Mm-hmm.
and really, there's multiple concerns playing out at the same time. But to kind of summarize, they were concerned about the fact that we are not clear on what the intention is of the non-human intelligent life that is here.
Mm-hmm.
Under that sort of header, there's also the realization that in the opinion of everyone interviewed, we're not talking about one non-human intelligent life. We're talking about multiple forms of life, multiple species, and they might all have different intentions. So that's this big mystery box of what are those intentions, and is it a threat, right? And then the other bucket of concern that they all were really clear on is that adversarial nations like China and Russia have been experiencing the same thing as us, and they have also been retrieving crashed UAP and trying to reverse engineer them. And this high stakes technology race we're in is essentially, many of the people in the film refer to it as the Manhattan Project on steroids. It's a high stakes technology race, and there is a general fear amongst everyone I interviewed that if we don't sort of get our act together as a nation and take this as seriously as we can and put as much resources as we can towards it, we might wake up one day and find that an adversarial nation beat us to the punch, and has leapfrogged us technologically. And something to clarify for folks listening who have been tracking this issue, it's not a black and white thing of like, did we reverse engineer or did we not? Like, there's steps to it, right? So yeah, my takeaway from everyone I've interviewed is that the U.S. has made a lot of progress in reverse engineering this technology, no question. But it doesn't mean everything's been cracked,
Yeah.
And so we are still in a race. So two things can be true. We can have made a lot of progress, but still be worried about,
not fully cracking the egg.
an adversary cracking it fully before us.
Yeah.
And so the stakes of that situation are something that dozens of people told me keep them up at night.
I saw that, there was, just because I'm in this world, some people were commenting, oh, this feels like a commercial for the deep state and for the military industrial that whole world to get more money to, make more weapons.
I know. I've seen some of those comments too, and I'm like, yeah, that's hilarious to me because I would love it if someone else had paid for this movie.
Yeah. Well, because
when you're pulling money from your savings account to like pay for stuff, and you see that, you're like,
Well, yeah, because Lou Elizondo, he gets a lot of flack for, oh, you're a plant, you're out here trying to raise dollars in the defense budget. I know you have a close relationship with him, having worked with him on the film for so long. How does he take that criticism? Because he's never really, I haven't ever heard him really speak about that.
Him and other people in the film have been on the receiving end of those kind of accusations. I just read a comment online about
don't do that. Don't ever read the comments.
Yeah, don't read the comments.
It's hard probably not to.
Never read the comments.
Try not to. But I mean, look, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and it's fine. I understand it. Like, I understand where people are coming from. The truths being revealed in this film and in these hearings that Congress has been holding, they're hard truths for a lot of people to accept, and it's easier for a lot of people just to, write it off as something else. It's easier for them to wrap their head around it that way. So I get where it comes from, and it's, I think it's probably like essentially like growing pains for humanity. We got to like get through people throwing out all these crazy excuses for what it could be before everyone just accepts the reality of it.
I think 1,000%. And again, I'd love to hear your thought. One part that I'm finding hard is the communication, like whatever we want to call it. There's 1,000%. It's got to have been communication. They've definitely communicated with us why they're here. Have you figured or heard?
Look, there's some people in my film that talk about contact events that happened involving non-human intelligent life and officials from the CIA and the Air Force. And look, I wasn't there. I didn't see that with my own eyes, but when credible people are putting their reputations on the line to say, I know this to be true.
Wow.
You got to put some stock in it. I think that's like that's a point that I really want to shine a light on. Everybody I interviewed, these are super credible people who have had long-running careers. They've got a lot to lose. They spent their whole career in life building up their reputation, right? And they're putting their reputation on the line to tell us what they lawfully can. And in my opinion, like in 2025, that's the best evidence we could hope for.
Yeah.
You could put I've said it a couple times, you could put a 4K video of a UFO over a military base on your show, and half the human population will be like, oh, your Hollywood friends made that in a visual effects studio, or it's AI or this or that. But, people like Rubio, people like Clapper, people like Jay Stratton, who is the director of the government's UAP task force, Brett Federson, who's in my film, he was the head of aviation security on Obama's White House National Security Council. He was an FAA official under Trump. Like, these guys putting their reps on the line and saying, this is what I know to be true. It's impossible to ignore,
And the definitive conclusion that this is, from your perspective, this is intelligent life from somewhere else, and they are interacting with us.
My conclusion is that there is non-human intelligent life here, and where it's from remains a question. I think all options are on the table.
What do you lean most towards?
I mean, I definitely think some of the non-human intelligent life that's here has been here a very long time, and probably before us. Whether they're from here or whether they're from somewhere else, I think that's a big question mark. But I also think, based on everything I've learned, that we're not dealing with one non-human intelligent life. I think that there's multiple forms of non-human intelligent life, and some might be new to here and from somewhere else, and some might have been here the whole time. it's a fascinating can of worms,
How many, we'll call it species for the sake of the conversation, do they think are actually coming around? Because you said multiple different types.
Yeah, I don't know a definitive answer, and no one had a definitive answer, but multiple people talked about the fact that there have been UAP crashes that had non-human bodies in the crash sites, and that not all the bodies looked like they were the same species, that there were at least several different species.
Yeah.
And again, this is not like, random knucklehead saying this extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
It's people who are graybeards in the intelligence community who have been a part of in some cases 50 years of black programs, which are, more secretive than classified programs, they're super serious people.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to ignore what they're saying. Something that's worth sharing is that in all the interviews I did, like when anyone really credible shared something truly extraordinary, like that, like talking about the recovery of non-human bodies, when I was doing the interviews, I could just genuinely feel like they were getting a weight off their shoulders.
Yeah.
Like they felt relieved that they said out loud. They felt nervous as they were saying it, but then the second they were done completing their sentences, you could just feel it. They were like,
Well, it's a huge weight. I
Yeah.
mean, imagine that. Like this,
Yeah.
that you've got the greatest secret of mankind,
Yeah.
and you know information that the public does deserve to know.
Yeah.
And living with that, it must be just an incredible weight.
Yeah. Many of them articulated to me how that knowledge, it kept them up at night.
Yeah.
Because it's such profound information, and like they couldn't tell their wives, or their kids or their friends, and they would, be out amongst the public, and they'd be in their head thinking about like, well, why do I know this and all these people don't?
I mean, well, you think about the technology, and one thing I look at, how I know this is true, look how much technology has happened to us in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're probably still meant to like be in the 60s, right? So think about this, right? And I grew up in the 80s like you did, and technology in the 80s, everything. Think about how far we are so quickly. It doesn't make sense. But when you think about it, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the technology is moving so quickly because of this. It has to be.
To that point, was there anything that the people you interviewed revealed to you that they were like, oh no, that was reverse engineered, off-world tech? Was there anything specifically that they spoke to?
No one spoke to any specific
probably classified
technological.
Highly.
I just think that's a line that they wouldn't cross.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people did talk about is how defense contractors who get put on the reverse engineering effort, and whose job it is to, understand this technology and reverse engineer it, it's not realistic that some of those breakthroughs are not going to end up in influencing the commercial side of their business.
Sure.
And every now and then, a breakthrough can be slipped into the commercial side of their business. Yeah. And there's really no way around that happening. It's just
who are the main players in the private contracting world you think are kind of holding the keys to this?
So everyone I interviewed, and all my sources for information that were not in the film, they all consistently said the same names. So this is their opinion, not mine, but they all said Lockheed Martin,
of course,
Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Aerospace Corporation, and Battelle. And a lot of them actually went in the weeds on backstories of all these companies too, in that a lot of some of the names I just said acquired other companies that were like early on players in this effort.
Did
one
EG
big one early on was TRW, EG&G.
Okay, I was going to say,
one.
yeah, did that ever come up? Because I know that they were very crucial in like the early, well, from what I've learned, that, you know, everyone always said that they're the biggest company you've never heard of.
Yeah, TRW was, I think, the prime contractor in the beginning, but then they got gobbled up by these other bigger companies.
Yeah.
And they inherited their stuff.
Do you think a part of why disclosure has been so hard to come out from like a government level is because of how we cycle through generals, government officials, things like that? You know, because really people are only in a position for 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And you just get ping-ponged around.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite parts of the film. Marco Rubio breaks down how the reality of that situation has helped contribute towards the secrecy. So he breaks down how, you know, a defense contractor gets given exotic materials of non-human origin in, let's say, the late 40s, right? There's some government overseer who's supposed to oversee that contract, right? Some intelligence official or a senator, someone's got knowledge of it on like day one, right? Then, you know, 4 or 5 years pass, that government overseer, he retires, he dies, he moves on to something else. The next guy comes in, he knows this program exists, but he doesn't know all the learnings and like the full picture, right? Contractor still stays the same though, right? They're just working away on this stuff, right? Then, you know, you go through that same cycle, like every 8 to 8 years, you know, by the time you get into like the 60s or the 70s, that contractor has decades of like institutional knowledge and advancements and breakthroughs. And, you know, maybe they're slipping some stuff in their commercialized side of their business. And the person who technically should be the government contractor at that point doesn't even know the program exists.
Yeah.
They have absolutely no clue. You know?
And
then you get to now, and it's like the government the guy who's supposed to be overseeing that doesn't even know it ever existed.
Yeah.
You know, and they're chasing shadows and trying to find out the truth. That's why a lot of, you know, there's all these misconceptions, I think, about the landscape. And my hope is the Age of Disclosure, the documentary sheds light on it. But, you know, you hear these comments people say like, you know, these senators know the truth and they're keeping it from us. It's like most of them are trying to find out the truth, just like us.
It's true.
Like the defense contractors have got so much control over this. The other thing that Rubio breaks down is that the people in the various elements of government that are involved in this, the people who are holding the secrecy and gatekeeping, they're career bureaucrats. They're people who can stay in a position for 20, you know, like in the film, a number of the officials I interviewed reveal that the gatekeeper of these secrets at the CIA is the director of science and technology. That's a bureaucratic position. That person can hold that job for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Whereas the director of the CIA is a political appointee, and they come and go with different administrations. Yeah. Right. So as Rubio breaks down the way our government is set up, you know, these career bureaucrats they're empowered to control a situation like this. They can just wait out sitting presidents. They can wait out, you know, Senate leadership. You know, they just keep it to themselves because, you know, otherwise, as Rubio put it, it never organically percolates up to the top. Yeah. So that's how you get in these situations where, like, as he breaks down, he says on camera, you know, a sitting president wouldn't even know who to ask. Yeah. You know,
now I saw some things online that like Rubio was kind of walking back some of the statements he made in the documentary. Was that accurate, or was that just the internet doing its thing?
I don't think it's a fair assessment of what you're referring to as an interview he did with Hannity. Mm-hmm. And Hannity brought it up unexpected and asked him about it. And he wasn't prepared to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he said, though, which the internet has chose to disregard, right? First thing he said is, I'm not going to disavow anything I said. It's the first thing he said.
Okay.
Right? You know, when I interviewed him, he wasn't the National Security Advisor, and he wasn't the Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. It was in the final days of his role as a senator that I interviewed him, when he was the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And at the time, he was very aggressively pursuing the truth on this. And he very much wanted wanted to share with the public what he lawfully could, and he chose this film to be the forum for him to do that, right? In this new situation, his words have much more impact, you know? If he was to answer Hannity's questions the way the average Joe would have like wished he did, he would essentially, in that role that he's in now, he would essentially be scooping the president on the biggest moment a leader could have in human history.
Yeah.
Right? Like if he just chose that moment to double down on the fly on a random Hannity interview, like, so I think given the circumstances and the lay of the land and the position he's in now, I think he handled that conversation the only way he could have, you know? He spent over an hour with me. And he told me how important he thought this film is to bring the truth out. So, and if you rewatch his interview in the film, he goes farther than he's ever gone.
Oh, I mean, it was like, my thought.
I was shocked.
Yeah. Yeah. Watching it, I was like, how are they allowed to say this stuff knowing, you know, the landscape of secrecy around this? I was shocked that they were being so forthcoming.
The average person also doesn't know how involved Rubio has been behind the scenes in driving disclosure forward. So when he was the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he was deeply involved in uncovering the truth, and trying to get the Senate caught up on all this knowledge that had been hidden from them. And he was actually the force behind the scenes that got the first historic legislation language pushed forward for UAP disclosure. The coronavirus relief bill that Trump signed, Rubio pushed in there the language that required the intelligence community and the DOD to do a classified and unclassified UAP report, a classified version to Congress and a non-classified version to the public. Remember when it was all in the news, like this report's coming out? He was the powerful hand behind the scenes that got that legislation language in there. Also behind the scenes, he was the force that helped get Jay Stratton's support from the U.S. Senate to start the UAP task force. Consistently, he's been a real powerful hand behind the scenes pushing for disclosure. He also co-sponsored the first versions of the UAP Disclosure Act. This past year, Senator Schumer and Senator Rounds were the bipartisan face of that legislation, but it started with Rubio and them. I think he's just, I think we all have to assume that someone who's been historically that interested in the topic and pushing for disclosure is now handling the issue behind the scenes in this role he's in now. He's the second most powerful guy in the world, arguably.
You know what worries me? The technology. And there was a great reference in the film. It's like you have ants in your back, in your yard, and it comes too close to the door. If there's so much information coming out, and these people, whoever they are, understand there might be a threat, right? The technology, everyone's knowing what's going on and happening. How does that turn for us? Because us fighting them would be like us going back to the 1900s. Their technology has to be so far advanced that we know we wouldn't stand a chance. I mean, is that something that people are worried about?
I don't think, based on everything I've learned, I don't think that anyone is thinking that the militaries of the world would be able to, form against this advanced technology.
Yes.
The bigger concern is what happens if one of our adversaries fully cracks this technology before we do, fully, right? And decides to use it against us, decides to weaponize it. Going back to Rubio for a second, if you rewatch the film, there's a beat where he talks about how he's essentially saying if we don't take this more seriously, we could wake up one day to find out that China got there before we did. And to quote him, he says, and we won't know how they got there or when they got there, but we'll be screwed. Those are the words he uses. And if you watch it closely, you could feel how concerned he is about this. I think his chin buckles a little bit. And
wow.
And I think that's the biggest concern. But I honestly, from everything I've learned, I'm grateful he's in the role he is now. I think he's a really impressive person. I think he's very thoughtful. I think he's on top of this. And I think he has learned more about the reality of the situation than 99% of the people in leadership positions in our country. And I think it's a great thing that he's both the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, which, like, for folks who don't realize this, that is extremely rare. That's happened once in the history of the United States. It was Henry Kissinger. For a very small period of time, he had both positions. So I think it's a good thing. And I'm grateful that he participated in the film. And, when he was in that, position where he could speak more freely, he did.
Do you think the secrecy is more about keeping this tech away from adversary nations or about stopping public panic?
It's a lot of things, I think. I think there's a fear of people panicking over the unknown or these this new information that questions their sort of like belief systems. I think there's a fear of there's a saying in the intelligence community that I heard over and over from the people I interviewed. They would say, you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. So meaning, tell the American people this, what we know and we don't know, we're also telling our enemies what we know and don't know, right? And that might give them some sort of advantage. So that's a concern. And then there's also just a lot of money coming from people who benefit from this secrecy into the campaigns of politicians who essentially, when asked, help contribute towards the cover-up.
I read something a while ago, and it was talking about after the Manhattan Project, with the creation of the atomic bomb and kind of cracking atomic energy. There was a lot of talk in the late 40s and 50s about, hey, if we applied the same amount of resources towards what we did with the atomic program, we can crack the gravity drives and all this stuff. And then it kind of just disappeared. Do you think that was like a hint with that? Like, hey, we're working on this, and it's the next phase.
Yeah, I do. I mean, in the film, I put in the famous military-industrial complex speech that Eisenhower gave, because it was a reflection of what was happening with this at the time. Like, defense contractors were already becoming so empowered back then, and so in control of developing these breakthrough technologies off the back of this stuff, that even the sitting president at the time, wanted to warn the country about the danger of that and how it could lead to this sort of like unchecked power that's against our democratic way of life. And so I think a lot of progress started way back then.
Do you think Eisenhower knew about this stuff?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Wasn't that what was the story about a president taking someone to see? There was a story.
Nixon.
It was Nick. Yeah, it was Nixon took an actor, right?
It was.
How did he do that?
He apparently the story.
Jackie Gleason.
That was it. Yeah, the story that I heard is that he was playing golf with Jackie Gleason, and the subject of UFOs came up, and he's like, "Oh, I'll show you," and he took him to
Air Force Base, or
I don't know if it's true.
Yeah.
It's a cool story.
Yeah, great story. And like Jackie Gleason, like, he built a house that built some building that looked
He built a house that looked like a UFO. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that. It was for sale last year.
Ah.
Yeah.
You should have bought it.
Yeah, I looked at it.
What about this technology that they have, which is really fascinating? And I guess it's true, like how they could just go from galaxy to galaxy. I mean, they just have this propulsion system.
That's what they think it is.
I mean, it has to be. I mean, it's so far advanced how they can go, 50 to 100,000 miles an hour.
There are moments in life where everything just stacks up at once. Stress, anxiety, burnout. Maybe even after a breakup or a stretch where you're running on empty. And you realize, you know what? I could really use someone to talk to. The problem is actually finding a therapist, especially one who takes your insurance, can feel impossible. And that's always seemed backwards to me. We use insurance for our physical health, so why shouldn't we use it for the same way for our mental health? That's why I really like what Rula, R-U-L-A, is doing. Rula is a healthcare provider group that works with over 100 insurance plans, which means the average copay is about $15 a session. Real therapy from licensed professionals without paying a fortune out of pocket. And Rula doesn't just throw you the first available provider. They actually take your goals and preferences into account and give you a curated list of in-network therapists who are a good fit. No wait lists, no endless back and forth, and appointments can happen as soon as tomorrow. Thousands of people are already using Rula to get affordable, high-quality therapy that's actually covered by insurance. Visit Rula.com/trying to get started. After you sign up, you'll be asked how you heard about them. Please support our show and let them know we sent you. That's Rula, RULA.com/trying. You deserve mental health care that works with you, not against your budget. And just to say it again, visit Rula.com/trying to get started. After you sign up, you'll be asked how you heard about them. Please support our show and let them know we sent you. That's Rula, RULA.com/trying. You deserve mental health care that works with you, not against your budget. You know, I've lost count of how many times I've walked out of a doctor's office feeling kind of brushed off. You know, you get told you're fine, drink more water, no real data, no actual plan, and meanwhile, you're still dealing with fatigue, brain fog, or just wondering what the hell you should actually be doing for your health. That's why I'm genuinely fascinated by what Superpower is building. Instead of guessing, Superpower gives you real insight to comprehensive lab testing, over 100 biomarkers, and then turns that into something you can actually use. Heart health, hormones, metabolism, vitamins, even environmental toxins, which is kind of cool. It's a full picture of what's going on inside of your body. What really gets me excited is that Superpower doesn't just dump information on you. They give you an actionable health plan, nutrition guidance, lifestyle adjustments, and even supplement or prescription suggestions you can get directly from them. No bouncing between apps or second-guessing yourself. You even get your true biological age and can track it over time, year after year. Superpower used to cost $499, but right now it's just $199 for the full experience, which is kind of wild considering how much data you get. Make this the year you stop guessing about your health with Superpower. Not only did Superpower reduce their price to just $199, but for a limited time, our listeners get an additional $20 off with the code TRYING. Head to superpower.com and use the code TRYING at checkout for $20 off your membership. After you sign up, they'll ask you how you heard about them, so make sure you mention the podcast to support the show.
But so basically, like a number of the scientists in my film who have worked on classified UAP programs for the government, they reveal in the film the basics of what they figured out with regard to how UAP work. And
I loved this part of the film.
Me too.
It was my favorite.
This is where I want to get to.
It was a fascinating.
Yeah, I love this.
Making it was fascinating. Having these conversations.
Yeah. This is what I want to get into.
But essentially, they shared a big breakthrough they had was realizing that these craft are essentially. I'm going to put this in like super like basic layman's terms because I'm not a scientist, right? So this is how I processed it, right? Essentially, these craft are harnessing a ridiculous amount of energy in a localized area, and they're creating a bubble around the craft.
Yeah, so
a bubble that's warping space-time around the craft. And so the craft is operating inside of this bubble, and it separates the craft from the environment. And so essentially what that leads to is, all the laws of physics that govern, aviation
and our reality.
Yeah. And like our understanding of how aircraft work, don't apply, right? The craft inside the bubble is not at all impacted by the environment around it. So, it doesn't need wings to fly. Everything we understand about the technology required for an aircraft to function is no longer applicable. And it also ends up, because it's in its own space time, in reality, the craft inside this bubble could be just having like a leisurely, stroll. But to us, it looks like they're going at these crazy, impossible speeds. It looks like they're going at speeds that would turn if there was a living being in it, it would just like
liquefy it.
Yeah, liquefy them. But it doesn't happen to them. And it's probably because they're not actually going that fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wild part of the film. I encourage everyone to like watch it a few times.
Yeah.
Let it sink in, and then also think about who it is that's saying these things.
Yeah, these like
they are
nuclear physicists and
really high level, respected guys. Like Dr. Hal Puthoff is like a graybeard in the science community of like defense and intelligence work, and Eric Davis has been working with him for years and is a legend in that space too. Up until just recently, he had been working for like a decade as a senior scientist for Aerospace Corporation. Like, very credible.
Yeah, these are real people. This isn't a guy with a tinfoil hat in his basement.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating part of the film. And so that technology, also one of the big reveals in the film is that this technology, even like the ability to harness this immense amount of energy and where they draw that energy from, like that in there somewhere is like the key to the energy crisis and solutions to global warming, all these huge issues that face humanity. So a lot of the people in my film talk about how this technology can be used to revolutionize the way we live.
Yeah.
The ability to go from one place to another, like instantaneous acceleration that these UAP that display, like the ability to go from one place to another very fast, like that could change the way we live, the way we get from one point to the other.
The oil industry hates it.
Yeah. And then of course there's a lot of other industries that it would put out of business,
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the fear that kind of technology can be weaponized.
Mm-hmm.
If a bad actor wanted to find a new delivery system for a weapon of mass destruction, this is it.
Yeah, it could just materialize in the lawn of the White House type shit.
Yeah. So it's as Hal Puthoff actually says, in his view, this should become a humanitarian issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we balance the good things that can come out of this, and worrying about the bad things?
Yeah. What do you think about people like Bob Lazar? Do you think that his what he shared and what he disclosed over the last few years, do you think that's do you consider that like a credible source?
I mean, I've certainly like read a lot about him, like everyone else has. A lot of the things he talked about years ago are in line with what's coming out now to be true. So I know that, but I don't know if that's information he heard from someone else or if he had direct knowledge. I'm not sure.
Did you ever encounter any misinformation that you were like, oh, this person's just?
Oh yeah, 100%.
What kind of
there's
stuff?
There's a number of people that I was sent or that came out of the woodwork to me when I was putting this film together that I spent time talking to and getting to know and hearing what they had to say and ultimately didn't decide not to interview them. Because either I just felt in my gut like what they were saying to me was complete nonsense, and they just wanted to either get in the film for their own ego reasons, or they were trying to sabotage it.
Yeah.
There were other people that I decided not to interview because when I ran their name by folks on the Senate Intelligence Committee or the Armed Services Committee, or other people in my film, the feedback I got was that person's literally making every single thing up. You should stay clear of them, So yeah, I'll never know whether these people's intention was to sabotage, or they just thought it'd be cool to be in a film. I don't know, but I constantly was having to, really carefully evaluate everyone before I decided to interview them.
Yeah.
And there was also, by the way, some interviews I did with really credible people that I unfortunately had to just end up cutting for time because, you know, getting a film down to a digestible runtime is a big challenge.
Yeah.
It's a really hard,
especially one of the
creative
subject matter that's so big.
And so then you start having to have tough decisions to make. Like, well, if guy A and B are both saying the same point, I got to choose one, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise it's going to start to feel repetitive. And so, yeah, there were a few interviews I did with really credible, great people that I'm grateful they did interviews. But I had to just cut them for time. And maybe if I make a sequel, or another film down the line, those interviews could be used. But yeah, it was certainly the toughest creative process I've ever been a part of, was getting this thing down to this runtime.
Yeah.
What was nice about it was very well rounded. I liked the Stanford doctor because I'm very much into, longevity and
Dr.
the immune
Gary
system.
Nolan.
Yeah. So, and again, it really makes sense, right? You have these people interact and they totally destroy someone's, the energy and everything's their immune systems, right? It's like, it's factual, the blood work, right? What did you learn about that? Because that was really interesting to me, that people had the interaction.
Yeah. Dr. Gary Nolan's work is fascinating. So for people that don't know, Dr. Gary Nolan's a senior professor and scientist at Stanford School of Medicine. He's done some extraordinary breakthrough work in his public life. And about 15 years ago or so, he started secretly working with the Department of Defense and elements of the CIA to study the biological impact of UAP. So there was a number of intelligence officials and military officials who had UAP encounters, either a random event or people that were involved in a crash UAP recovery, or that were near exotic materials that were being reverse engineered. They had some exposure to UAP, and as a result, they had negative biological effects.
Yeah.
So there was all this data that the DoD and the elements of the CIA had, and they wanted a medical professional to really lean into studying this. And originally their goal was to see if there was any definitive markers that could be used to confirm whether people did have experiences, right? So like, if military guy A 100% encountered a UAP, like it as a fact, and he has this biological effect, and guy B that also had a UAP encounter has the same biological effect, then you can come to the conclusion that, people someone who claims to have had a UAP encounter, but you're not sure if they did, however, they have this marker, then it's gives you
verifiable.
It gives you more confidence that what they said they experienced was true.
Yeah.
So that's what their agenda was. And Gary Nolan worked with a certain doctor who worked for the CIA, and they ran point on all this research. And he started to find all of these very significant commonalities that people who had encounters had. And his work is fascinating. And in the film, he talks at a high level about how the negative biological effects of being near UAP are very understandable. He likens it to, like, if you didn't know what an F-16 was and you stood behind it when it was taking off, you're going to get burned, right? And so, as humanity is dealing with this exotic technology that we don't fully have context for, it's not surprising that it's causing some biological impact. I don't think anyone thinks it's intentional. I think it's just a byproduct of being near exotic technology that's giving off a great deal of energy.
What was your favorite story that you had? Like, what sticks out for you that's like, that is wild?
Oof, that's an impossible question, man. I mean, I feel like making this film, I felt like it was like every week I was having my mind blown.
Yeah.
One moment that really stands out to me So when I interviewed General Jim Clapper, so for people who don't know, Jim Clapper was the head of Air Force intelligence for a long time. Later in his career, he was the director of national intelligence. He's been the head of numerous intelligence agencies. He was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's like his resume. Yeah, his resume reads like a Marvel character. You're just like, there's few people alive that have resumes anywhere near his, right? And he had never really talked publicly about the topic. I think he maybe like couple random interviews here and there on like CNN catch him off guard about it, but he doesn't get into it, right? He had never really revealed anything that he knew. And he decided to participate in the film. He thought it was really important to participate in the film and help share what lawfully could be shared. And in my interview with him, he goes on the record saying that when he was head of Air Force intelligence, they had an active program to investigate and study UAP. And that's really significant because the Air Force has been saying for decades that they don't have a program to study and investigate UAP. The Air Force has been saying they haven't had an investigation since the closure of Project Blue Book, the Air Force's program that closed in, I think, 1969 or 1968. So here was arguably the most senior living Air Force intelligence official saying, no, that's not true. We did have a program. And on top of that, he says on camera, for the record, that UAP activity over some of our most sensitive training ranges or military bases is real. And he says, most notably, Area 51. So he goes on the record saying that UAP activity over Area 51 is in fact real. And that was a really profound moment, I think, because for the average person who hasn't really gone down the rabbit hole of this topic, but just kind of like generally hears things, they think the average person, I believe the average person thinks Area 51 and UAP activity there is conspiracy and nonsense and not real, right? And so here's this very credible, real person saying, no, it is real. Yeah. And I thought that was a big moment. I actually remember there were a few very senior former intelligence officials in the room when I did that interview. And as soon as Clapper finished saying that, you could tell that, like I was referring to earlier, there was like a weight off his shoulders. And he kind of just sat there for a second. He kind of put his head down and was like processing that he had just said that, right? And in that moment, I turned and I looked at the other guys in the room and they were all like, whoa, wow. Couldn't believe he had said that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so there's little moments here and there like that. I had a moment like that when I was interviewing Rubio, when he started just candidly talking about how, even sitting presidents have not been read in on this, and how, it's naive to think that a U.S. president can come into office and on the first day say, take me to Roswell, show me the alien bodies, open the whole thing up, right? And when he's using those words and being so candid about it, that was pretty surreal for me. Yeah. Sitting in a Senate hearing room that I don't think any doc's ever shot in, talking with one of the most powerful senators and a guy who's very knowledgeable at the issue, and he's just candidly talking about the lay of the land and the brutal reality of it. That was one of those moments that
did anyone describe what these people look like? Has anyone, like, in your conversations that because you hear a lot on the news. I remember I lived in Las Vegas for a couple of months, and people cited these non-human form being 10 feet. Right? It's like, did anyone describe that to you? What these people look like?
There only a few people went into details of what their knowledge is about what non-human beings look like. One intelligence official who told me about an encounter he personally had. He described the being he saw as frankly what's depicted in Close Encounters. He said that's the closest thing I can use as a reference point to describe what I saw.
So you little kind of small creatures with big heads kind of vibe?
Like the beings at the end of Close Encounters that step off.
The ET looking thing.
Greys. No, the ones that are like people refer to them as the Greys.
Okay, yeah.
And then I did interview someone who described encountering beings that looked like little ETs.
Wow.
Something I found really interesting. I mean, look,
Wow.
again, like I grew up, my childhood's the 80s and early 90s,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think I watched E.T. 1,000 times by the time I was 15, right?
Jesus.
And I personally found it really interesting how a number of people who did talk about encountering beings described what they saw to be in line with the non-human beings depicted in Spielberg's two, classics, E.T. and Close Encounters. And, maybe that's, just the best pop culture reference point they had, or maybe Steven,
Knew something.
Knew a lot more than people realized. We'll see.
Yeah. Or the movie Fire in the Sky with D.B. Sweeney.
Fire in the Sky. Okay, there's two movies that kept me up as a kid.
Yeah,
like that really terrified me.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Me too.
So most people, I feel like most people our age say things like, if you say what movie scared the crap out of you when you were a kid, they say like, Friday the 13th or something.
No.
Right? For me, it was two movies. It was Fire in the Sky.
Me too.
And it was Red Dawn.
Hell yeah.
Because Red Dawn was like, at the time, like, I remember, Cold War vibes were on the cover of every, like, Time magazine and all these magazines my folks would get. And then here's this movie about like the Russians invading middle America.
Wolverines,
and
baby.
and like regular kids like having to like, rise up and like fight against them. And you remember there's that powerful scene in the movie where the brothers, they find their dad had been taken and he's in one of these like prison camps basically, and they find him and they have that heart to heart through the fence. And they're basically saying goodbye to him. They know they're not going to see him again, and like he's like, avenge me, boys. I remember that movie really got to me.
Oh,
man.
same. It's so funny. It's exact same with Fire in the Sky and with that.
And Fire in the Sky, for people to know, it's about a famous abduction story. A guy named Travis Walton, who as the story goes, he was I think the job description he had was a logger, or him and his crew were cutting
Snowflake,
trees.
Arizona.
They were cutting trees down, and
wow,
they were doing some forest work, and then they had this encounter where a UFO came down, and he got close to it, and then apparently he was taken, and there was a whole investigation. People thought his friends killed him, did something nefarious, and they all stuck to their story, and they passed lie detectors tests, and then some time passed, and then he showed up, and he said that he escaped this abduction scenario, and then they let him go, and he's always stuck to his story, and the people that he was with always stuck to their story. It's fascinating.
That's a fascinating story. It's
very fascinating,
but it's so real. The movie's terrifying.
It is.
I mean, those when they're doing the test, when they're doing the test, I was.
Do you know the real story though? And he got pissed about the dramatization of it.
Tell me.
So when I listened to this like 3-hour podcast with him, and he was talking about
the Joe Rogan one.
It wasn't the Joe Rogan one. It was this other one he did. I'm trying to remember it. It was just some random. I just kind of stumbled across it on YouTube, and he said that when he approached the craft, he got hit with some kind of
missed
energy wave or something. It kind of it debilitated. He got very sick from it essentially, and his logger crew bailed. They were like, "I'm out of here!" Like they freaked out and left him. And he said when he was taken by these beings, he said he didn't think he was off world, because he thought he was in some kind of base here on Earth, and they said there were humans there. He said there were like government. He said he didn't know if they were government officials or what. But he said there were humans there with these aliens that were getting him better, and he got sick from encountering this UAP and they healed him and brought him back.
So that's an interesting thing. I did hear from one of the intelligence officials I interviewed. I won't say his name, but one of the guys in the film. I asked him about the Travis Walton story. And
this is great.
He told me that his understanding was that Travis accidentally got too close and was hurt. And this intelligence official's takeaway was that the non-human beings took him to heal him. and then sent him back.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that is something that has come up in some of the conversations I've had with intelligence officials multiple times, not just with regard to Travis Walton, but there's been a few incidences where someone got too close to a UAP and were hurt. And then there was another event that happened to them where the damage was done away with, was they were healed. And so there is this like unknown history of whatever these non-human beings are, caring about damage they do to humans, which is interesting. And I don't know if that goes for all non-human beings. I don't know if it's just these random incidences. I don't know if they're not connected, but I found it interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, immunology and inflammation, people in the next 30, 40 years, they'll be living to 120. So you think about these people having technology, inflammation, healing people, they're so far advanced with the medical procedures. It must be unbelievable.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I don't want to create any spoilers, but Jay Stratton, who is in the film, he's one of the really senior intelligence officials in the film. He was the director of the U.S. government's UAP task force, the largest whole of government investigation of UAP ever. He investigated UAP and non-human intelligent life longer than any other official in U.S. history.
Wow.
I think it was like 16 or 19 years, where that was his, a big part of his focus. He's got a memoir, his like tell-all memoir coming out later this year.
Wow.
And I've read it. It's incredible. And one of the things he goes into is exactly what we're talking about now. The biological effects from UAP and some of these moments where someone had extraordinary healing as a result of their encounter. And I found that really, really compelling to read about. So that's something to look out for.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel fearful making this film?
I did. Yeah. There were a number of moments where I was really concerned. Look, there's a lot of, as most people would think it's fairly obvious, but like there's a lot of people that wish this movie didn't exist. Right.
Yeah.
And weren't happy about me trying to pull it off. Right. And, there were a number of people who behind the scenes tried to, scare me off from pursuing this, from continuing. There were some people who, wished I didn't figure out how to get the movie distributed, and there were some moments where I was really concerned, but I did keep falling back to, the fact that I had dozens of senior military, government, intelligence officials who not only knew what I was doing, but were involved in it and actively helping me pull it off. And I just took comfort in the fact that if anything bad happened to me, I thought it'd be pretty obvious, like too many people. It was within the intelligence, military, and government world, too many people knew what I was doing.
Did it take an emotional toll on you at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Caused a lot of stress for sure. And like a lot of sleepless nights and the other thing is a number of the people in my film, were also dealing with that same pushback. And a number of the people who were information sources for me were dealing with that same pushback.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of communication, behind the scenes about that. And, the other thing also, it's worth saying, I also took comfort in the fact that I knew I wasn't breaking any laws. I had no interest in anyone saying anything that was classified. I always made a point, even my private conversations, like, I don't want to know, I don't want anyone crossing any lines with me. I don't want to know anything I shouldn't know,
Smart.
And also, I think it's important that I came to realize through my interviews that the people who have had the job of keeping this secret. Like the film reveals this deeply hidden program. It's known as the Legacy Program, right? The people involved in that, I came to realize through all my interviews, they're not villains. They're not like comic book villains that are like these evil bad guys who have this like evil agenda. They're just people who have an extraordinary job for which there's no playbook for, and they think what they're doing is the best thing for the country. That's what they think, right? And so when I came to that conclusion, I also took, it helped me also feel comfortable proceeding, because I knew I wasn't trying to make anyone look like a villain. That wasn't my agenda. So I felt certainly there was moments where I felt concerned, but ultimately,
no black helicopters following you.
I actually had a helicopter over my house.
No way.
Yeah. Like very soon after, a senior member of one of the big Senate committees, who was helping me, he had a Black Hawk over his house, shortly after he had a conversation with me, and he interpreted it as a warning to not cross any lines, which of course I wouldn't want him to. He told me about it, and then the same thing happened to me soon after.
Wow.
And I live in a suburb of LA where that's not normal.
Yeah.
Right from Vandenberg. Straight from Vandenberg.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So longevity can feel overwhelming. There's a million things you're supposed to be doing, working out, supplements, biohacks, but honestly, it's just kind of exhausting. But I've learned that real health usually comes down to simple, consistent habits. One thing I've been paying way more attention to lately is energy. Not just feeling awake, but the deeper cellular kind of energy. Because the truth is, you can't out-train low energy. If your cells aren't producing what they need, everything feels harder. That's why Mighty Pure gummies really caught my attention. They're the first ever longevity gummies designed to support your cellular energy. They use a clinically proven compound called urolithin A that helps renew your cells' powerhouses, basically like charging your internal batteries every day. I like that it's simple, no complicated routines, no adding another handful of pills. I keep the gummies right next to my coffee, and it's just a part of my morning routine now. They're clean, vegan, sugar-free, and actually backed by real science, not just hype. If you're thinking about aging well, staying strong, and having steady energy for the long haul, this is an easy place to start. Get 39% off your Mito Pure gummies at timeline.com/trying. That's timeline.com/trying.
What else? By the way, speaking of crazy, something you just said like 10 minutes ago sparked a memory. Where you said in an interview, Travis Walton said that in his experience, he remembered seeing non-human beings and humans. I'd never heard that before, but an interview I did that isn't in the film, I left it out, was a former military guy who was stationed on a nuclear base who told me in my interview with him about an encounter he had. And he had a memory of ending up being, he believed he was taken and ended up on a craft. And he described his memory of seeing non-humans and humans. And I didn't include it in the film. I always thought it was interesting. But it is interesting hearing you say that Travis said he saw the same thing. Yeah.
I was having a conversation the other day with a friend. It was after I watched the film. We were talking about, some of these, you talk about how the military will use like tier 1 units to go and recover these crash sites. And it sparked a memory. Years ago, I knew this guy that worked for the Department of Energy. Mm-hmm. And it sparked this DOE conversation. And I was saying, not many people kind of talk about their involvement with this. And this guy, he was a part of their tier 1 team. And the DOE have the most, as he described to me, the most lenient use of fire rules out of any federal or government agency, because their job essentially, as a part of their job with being in this tier 1 team attached to the Department of Energy, is to transport nuclear missiles, nuclear material, whatever,
and deal with like broken arrows and
exactly, because you can't deploy armed U.S. soldiers on domestic soil. It's against the law, and God forbid they ever have to shoot anyone. So he said, "Oh no, we're tasked with not only protecting nuclear facilities, power plants, whatever, but we also, we'll go recover things." And I was like, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah." He's like, and we're allowed to open fire on anyone if we deem it a threat. And I was like, how does that work? He's like, well, because we transport the most highly classified materials in existence.
It's like Area 51. You ever see the people? They've got to be contractors too.
But when
this is next level.
Yeah, this is because if you think about it, once you leave a military base, the Army can't, the Navy, Army, whatever, they can't drive down a highway and fucking open up on someone.
I mean, what I've learned is that the recovery teams that are used are so well organized and so empowered, they can really quickly get to a crash site.
Yeah.
They can secure it through any means necessary. And then they can not only classify the mission immediately, but anything they recovered, the fact that the mission even happened, they can classify it.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people, I think, when more of this comes out, will find very hard to wrap their heads around is that, not only do those recovery teams have the ability to classify everything, but that they did on the mission or they recovered on the mission, but they don't even have to, in most cases, tell their superiors. So, if a special forces team is used by an element of the legacy program to do recovery, the people in that special forces team's normal chain of command might not even be aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. My old, I can't say that, but I have a very, very close friend who was a former Delta Force operator, and they do a lot of training at Area 51, and he was sharing some really, we'll talk offline, but yeah, he was sharing some really interesting stuff because he spent, he'd go there all the time.
Yeah.
And just their their leniency that they're allowed to operate in their world.
Yeah.
It's very broad.
Yeah. So here's like an interesting point. I've seen some confusion out there in the public where people, they look at the breakdown of the legacy program in the film as the interview subjects reveal. They reveal that the primary players in the legacy program are elements of the CIA, elements of the Air Force, elements of the Department of Energy, and major defense contractors. And I think there's been some confusion in the public where people see that and they say, oh, well, some of these recoveries happen in the ocean. Doesn't that mean that, Navy SEALs or some elements of the Navy have gotten involved with this? And the answer is yes, they have, but they can still be run not by the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
The CIA can use, Navy SEALs to run a mission, and those Navy SEALs don't have to tell the Navy chain of command about it.
Yeah.
The CIA could use Delta Force. Like there's numerous special operation teams that can be utilized by the CIA and the DOE.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's the compartmentalization of the legacy program is pretty impressive.
Yeah,
the fact that they can have, probably tens of thousands of people working on this.
Yeah,
in some capacity, but yet they still manage to keep such tight control of it.
Totally. And here's something, I just want to say, for the record, for anyone who's watching this and learning about this stuff, in the film where it breaks down, there's an actual chart, an org chart on screen. That's not something like I just decided this is what I think it is, right? And I made this up, and it's not something that like one person I interviewed made up. That was the takeaway from me interviewing more than the 34 people on screen, and talking to at least 50 very senior members of the intelligence community, the government, and the military who were advising me on the side. That was the result of every one of those people off the record saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
People who are not friends, people who have different ideologies, different political beliefs. There was not a single person I spoke to who said there was any other key player in the legacy program.
Yeah.
It was like that. Those are the players. This is what they do. This is how they use the other organizations, right? Yes, they can pull abilities from other intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
Like there's 16 or 19 intelligence agencies. Like they can pull tools from them and resources from them. If they need like a satellite view, they can go get it from a different agency. But it doesn't mean those agencies are involved or making decisions or aware of it. They might not even be told why they need that satellite view,
Yeah.
But every single person I interviewed and every person I talked to off camera, they all said the same thing.
Yeah.
And so as a filmmaker, like doing the research and putting it together, it wasn't even, my opinion had nothing to do with it. It's just like, this is what
you're hearing the same thing from
learning. Yeah.
Completely separate sources.
And also when you hear it from people that don't even like each other, like, then you're like, okay, or some people that like have never spoken or heard of each other, they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And no one, here's another interesting thing. No one that I got that information from said, oh, this is what I heard from someone. They said, this is what I know to be true.
Yeah.
So they all had their own different access points to this information. Yeah.
Was there ever incidents where people disclosed stuff and then later said, hey, you can't put that in?
No, people have asked me that, but surprisingly, no. But I think actually not surprisingly, because everyone went into this film with the goal of trying to bring about disclosure and sharing what they lawfully could. So the only line everyone I interviewed had, and only line I had was, don't say anything that's classified.
Yeah.
I don't want to know it, and you shouldn't say it, and things are classified for a reason. So, but there's a whole lot of information that can be lawfully shared, that these people have, that can be lawfully shared, that they just historically have kept to themselves because, like we talked about earlier, like the fear of repercussions and
Do you think because of what you've done in our lifetime, we'll definitely get to see these people?
I hope there's a full-blown public contact event.
What do you think that would look like
in our
lifetime?
I don't know, man. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I hope it happens.
Can it happen?
Yeah, I think it can happen.
Okay.
And but also what I hope happens is I think this film sets the stage for a sitting president to finally step to the microphone and tell the world we're not alone in the universe. There's a lot of speculation about whether that will actually happen. But I do think this film sets the stage for it.
Yeah.
This, in my opinion, like this film is disclosure in that you have dozens of highly placed government officials stepping out of the shadows and sharing with the public what they know to be true about this topic. It might not be the version of disclosure that the average person has in their head or has, this like romantic idea of like a big, press conference. But I think for the people really involved in this topic on the government side, they view this as this is a form of disclosure.
Yeah.
This is the truth coming out in a way that it never has before.
I've called it the staggered disclosure. They just kind of, I think the way I've seen it over the last 15 years now, it just seems like they're slowly like, hey, getting us used to these conversations. So when it does happen, because we're walking around with 4K cameras in our pockets, it's a matter of time before something gets recorded or released or, just from a citizen that you can't refute. And I think I don't know, I've just seen it as like, oh, they're just warming us up to this.
But I also think it's not like there's this like big organized team that is like okay, well, you'll say this day and you'll say this day.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's a lot of different, there's people who have learned the truth of this through a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Whether they were, a senator on a committee where they, ended up, in a skiff being told the brutal reality about this by a general or an admiral, or whether it's an intelligence official who, had access to, footage taken from a really classified data collection system that like people don't even know exists. But not only does he know it exists, but he saw video footage on it of a giant UAP over a military base. Like, people have these different access points to information, and I think they're all making their own decisions of like when they feel like they can comfortably step out of the shadows.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you're seeing this like staggered process. But look, everyone in my film felt like participating in this film was that moment for them where they would come out of the shadows. And I do think the film's going to lead to more people stepping out of the shadows. I've gotten a lot of phone calls from people after the film came out.
Oh, I bet.
Really senior folks inside of military, government, and intelligence communities who, have reached out to share what they could with me and to say, hey, if you ever make a follow-up film, I'd love to participate in it. So I do think that more people will start to come out and be encouraged to do so. There's a lot of people who have touched this, that's the other thing with regard to the legacy program itself. Everyone I interviewed who had real knowledge of it, talked about how this isn't like a small thing. This is a major operation with thousands of people who have been employed over many years.
Yeah.
So, at a certain point, I think, people involved in that will start, stepping out of shadows or deciding, hey, I'm in my 80s, screw it. I'm going to tell the world the truth. I think we'll start to see more of that.
Do you think we're safer knowing, or do you think it kind of leans into the fact of how fragile the human race really is versus what we think it is?
I think we're safer knowing. I think the truth, there's a dozen sayings like the truth will set you free and all these. I think honesty is the best policy. I think the truth coming out would be a good thing. And I think there's also like all these examples that we can point to where public knowledge of the pursuit of technological advancements was a good thing, right? Like, would we have won the space race if Kennedy didn't step to the microphone and do this big, rah, 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 get everybody fired up speech about how we're gonna win the race to the moon, we're gonna lead in space, how, remember it's in the film actually, it's in The Edge of Disclosure, we use that clip. Kennedy says, space technology, like nuclear technology, has no conscience of its own, it's up to mankind how we use it for good or for bad. That's why it's imperative the U.S., take this serious and lead in space. Like, would we have won the space race if he didn't do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. Like, you talk to people who grew up around that time, they felt compelled to contribute towards it.
Yeah.
It changed that speech and then the subsequent, getting to the moon changed the trajectory of a lot of people's lives. Commander Dave Fravor, the Navy fighter pilot in my film, who famously chased UAP in his fighter jet, he told me that he became a pilot because he was inspired by the moon landing. He remembered watching it on television and saying to his dad, like, I want to become a fighter pilot. Yeah. I want to become a pilot. Right. And then it segued into, a fighter pilot. But so, yeah, I don't know. I think when the pursuit of advancements like that, or like lofty goals, becomes made public, it's worked. Yeah. And Hal Puthoff, the senior scientist in the film, an analogy he made with me once, he said, in the Cold War, we kept everything secret, and our adversaries kept everything secret, but we all kind of like moved along at a very similar pace in our respective bubbles. He said, whereas the technology race and like the consumer product side, like consumer facing technologies, was a public endeavor, and like, our public technology progressed at a much quicker than adversaries. Like, technology in the United States, consumer-facing technology, far outpaced like consumer technology in Russia, for example, right? And it was just another argument for, letting the public know a bigger picture inspires like competition. It motivates people to put their brain power towards it. And so I just generally think the truth coming out on this would ultimately be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, what's next for you?
Thinking about a bunch of stuff. I'm involved in a lot of projects as a producer, many of which have nothing to do with the UAP topic. Some do. I really enjoyed directing. This movie was the first thing I directed after years of producing. So thinking about what could be a follow-up directing endeavor. I am considering a follow-up to this film, another doc, but I'm also looking at some scripted projects that I'm excited about. Some of which deal with this topic, some don't. Looking at a bunch of different options.
Nice.
It's an exciting new chapter for me, adding directing into the mix. But we'll see. On this front, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, what the impact of the film is on the government, like what happens next.
Yeah.
And I want to see what happens next before I decide if I'm going to do a follow-up film. But there's we talked about Fire in the Sky. There's so many fascinating, specific stories that touch this, that are stories I think deserve to be told.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about some of them as a producer. I'm thinking about some of them as a director-producer. We'll see. But a lot of great stories out there that should be told.
Absolutely.
And I'm grateful that I've gotten sort of a unique window into this whole interesting landscape.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, how can folks find you?
So the film right now is exclusively on Prime Video worldwide. You can rent it, you can buy it. I'm proud to say it's the best-selling documentary in the history of Prime Video.
I love that.
Very proud of that. It's available worldwide, every major country. There's subtitles in every major language. So I encourage people to get together with your friends and family and watch this and talk about it.
I loved it.
Join the conversation. And I think some people say, after I watch this, I find it so fascinating. Like, what can I do? And the answer is simple. Like, start hitting up your elected officials. Go tweet, send them messages on social media, call them, tell them this is something you want them taking seriously. People forget elected leaders really only pay attention to what they think their voters are telling them to pay attention to.
Yeah.
If we want to see real change, we need to put pressure on Congress, and then Congress can put pressure on the administration. I encourage everyone to watch it. Prime Video, join the conversation, drive it forward.
Awesome.
And I'm grateful for all,
And can people find you on social media? Yeah,
on social media. Me and the film are both on every major social platform. So follow me, follow the film. And just grateful for you guys helping me spread the word.
Thank you so much, Dan. And thanks. I could stay here for 3 hours.
Yeah, many questions. Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Great.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.